The punch landed harder than I expected, knocking me back against the mat as Harrison's intense gaze locked onto mine. "You're holding back, Kevin," he said softly, his hand lingering on my shoulder longer than necessary, sending a jolt through me that I couldn't explain, and in that moment, my carefully constructed straight life began to unravel. It was a typical Tuesday evening at Eastside Dojo in Seattle, the kind of place where the air always smelled of sweat, rubber mats, and quiet determination. The dojo was packed as usual, more than 50 students crammed into the bright open space, their white GIs flashing under the fluorescent lights while the sounds of focused breathing and occasional grunts filled the room. I had joined 3 weeks earlier on what I told everyone was a whim. College engineering classes were crushing me, and my dad kept calling from our small town outside Portland with the same lecture. "A real man knows how to fight, son. Stop hiding behind books." So I signed up, hoping the discipline would shut him up and maybe quiet the restlessness I felt every time I looked in the mirror and wondered why nothing about girls ever felt quite right. Harrison Thompson, the owner and head instructor, moved through the crowd like he owned gravity itself. 35, tall, broad-shouldered, with short dark hair that always looked perfectly tousled, and piercing blue eyes that seemed to read every weakness in a student's stance. Students called him Sensei behind his back, but to his face, it was always Harrison. The dojo was his empire, always crowded, always buzzing, the waiting list months long. Tonight, he paired me with him for sparring after the group warm-up. "Let's see what you've really got, Kevin," he said, that easy smile reaching his eyes. We circled each other on the mat. His instructions were calm and precise. When he corrected my guard, his palm pressed flat against my lower back, and something electric shot straight up my spine. I blamed the adrenaline, the heat of the room, anything but the way my pulse suddenly matched the rhythm of his breathing. I threw a half-hearted punch. He deflected it effortlessly and swept my leg. I hit the mat hard. He offered his hand, pulling me up closer than necessary. "You're strong, but you're fighting yourself more than me," he murmured, close enough that I caught the faint scent of his cedar cologne. I laughed it off, wiped sweat from my brow, and told myself it was nothing. I wasn't gay. I had dated Sarah for 6 months in high school. My parents still asked about her. This was just respect for a skilled teacher. After class, while everyone else headed for the showers, Harrison caught me by the door. "You did well tonight, but I can tell there's weight on your shoulders. Grab a coffee?" My treat. His voice was warm, no pressure, just genuine. I hesitated, then nodded. We walked to the little cafe around the corner, rain tapping the windows like impatient fingers. Over steaming mugs, he talked about starting the dojo 10 years ago after leaving a corporate job that nearly killed his soul. I found myself telling him things I'd never said out loud. The pressure to graduate top of my class, the way my mom kept hinting I should bring a girlfriend home for Thanksgiving, the quiet fear that I was disappointing them just by existing. Harrison listened without interrupting, his blue eyes steady. "Sometimes the expectations we carry aren't ours to begin with," he said quietly. "Finding your own path takes more courage than any fight on the mat." His words stayed with me the whole drive home. That night, I lay in my tiny apartment staring at the ceiling, replaying the feeling of his hand on my back. I shook my head, rolled over, and forced myself to think about the cute barista at the campus coffee shop instead. But sleep didn't come easy. The next few days I threw myself harder into training. The dojo stayed packed every evening. College kids like me, office workers blowing off steam, even a few families with teenagers. Harrison's classes were legendary. His mix of traditional karate and practical self-defense drew people from all over the city. Every time he demonstrated a technique on me, correcting my hips or adjusting my elbow, that same unexplained heat returned. I pushed it down, focused on the burn in my muscles, the satisfaction of a perfectly executed block. One rainy Thursday, I stayed late to practice alone. The dojo was finally quiet, mats empty except for me under the dimmed lights. I was working on my kata when Harrison stepped out of his office, towel around his neck. "Couldn't stay away, huh?" he chuckled, voice echoing slightly. He joined me without being asked, showing me a more advanced sequence. As he guided my arm through the motion, our faces ended up inches apart. I could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the way his lashes cast shadows on his cheeks. My heart hammered against my ribs like it wanted out. "You're a natural, Kevin," he said, voice lower than usual. I pulled back too quickly, mumbled something about a study group, and practically ran to my car. The whole drive home my hands shook on the wheel. I didn't understand why his voice kept replaying in my head like a song I couldn't turn off. By the third week my routine had settled into something almost comforting. Mornings were lectures and labs. Afternoons were library marathons, and evenings belonged to the dojo. The place never emptied. New students kept showing up, drawn by word of mouth and Harrison's reputation. I started recognizing regulars. Mike, my best friend from freshman year who joined after I dragged him once, always cracking jokes about picking up chicks in GIs. Alex, the lean blonde guy who seemed to linger near Harrison a little too long, and a dozen others whose names I was still learning. After one particularly brutal Thursday session, Harrison asked if I wanted to help lock up. Mike had already left, texting me about a party I had zero interest in. I said yes before my brain could argue. We wiped down the mat side by side in comfortable silence until Harrison broke it. You've improved a lot in 3 weeks. Most guys take months to get that focused. I shrugged, wiping sweat from my neck. Guess I needed an outlet. He studied me for a second, then asked, "Everything okay at home? You seem distracted tonight." I hesitated, then told him about the latest call from my dad, the not-so-subtle hints that I should be dating, that 23 was old enough to settle down like a normal guy. Harrison nodded slowly, leaning against the wall. Parents mean well, but they don't always see the whole picture. Something in his tone made me look up. For the first time, I noticed the faint sadness behind his easy smile. He changed the subject quickly, but the moment stuck. The following Saturday, the dojo hosted an open sparring day. The place was packed wall to wall, spectators lining the edges. Harrison ran the demonstrations, his movements fluid and powerful. When he called me up to assist, the crowd cheered. As we moved through the routine, his hand brushed mine longer than the move required. My skin tingled. Later, while everyone grabbed water, Alex cornered me near the water cooler. "You and Harrison seem pretty tight lately," he said, voice light but eyes sharp. "Just training," I answered too fast. Alex smirked. "Sure. He's got that effect on people." I didn't like the way he said it, but I let it go. That evening, Harrison invited me to grab burgers at the diner across the street. Over greasy food and endless coffee, we talked for hours. He told me about growing up in a small Midwest town where being different wasn't an option, about the relationship he'd kept hidden for years until it fell apart, because he was too scared to be honest. I listened, chest tight, and found myself admitting things I'd never told Mike. The nights I lay awake wondering why girls never made my heart race the way certain songs or certain looks did. Harrison didn't push. He just said, "It's okay to not have all the answers yet, Kevin. The mat teaches us that falling is part of learning to stand." When I got home, Mike was waiting on my couch with pizza and beer. "Dude, you and the sensei are basically besties now. You gonna start wearing matching GIs?" He laughed, but there was an edge to it. I forced a grin and changed the subject, but inside I felt the first crack in the armor I'd built around myself. The next week passed in a blur of classes and training. Every session with Harrison felt charged. He corrected my form with the same professional touch, yet each contact lingered a fraction longer. One night after everyone left, he asked me to stay for extra drills. We worked on ground defense until we were both breathless. Sitting on the mat catching our breath, he looked at me and said quietly, "You know you can talk to me about anything, right?" I nodded, throat dry. When his hand rested on my knee for just a second, I didn't pull away. The silence between us felt heavy with things neither of us was ready to name. That weekend my mom called. "Any nice girls at that dojo of yours?" she asked hopefully. I lied and said I was too busy training. Hanging up, I stared at my reflection in the dark window and felt the weight of every expectation pressing down. Across town, Harrison was probably closing the dojo alone, the same way he did every night. For the first time, I wondered what it would feel like to be there with him, not as a student, but as something more. The thought terrified me and thrilled me in equal measure. The first real crack appeared on a rainy Wednesday. Class had run long. The dojo still crowded, even at 9 o'clock. Harrison announced an advanced technique that required partners. He chose me. As we moved through the sequence, his chest pressed against my back while he demonstrated the hold. I froze. The contact was professional, Yet my body reacted like it had been waiting for exactly this. When he released me, his eyes met mine for a beat too long. "Good work," he said, voice low enough that only I heard. Later, while the last students trickled out, Alex lingered by the door watching us. I felt his stare like a warning. Mike texted me, "Saw you and Sensei getting cozy again." "Everything cool," I replied with a thumbs-up emoji and tried to ignore the knot in my stomach. Harrison locked the front door and turned to me. "Walk with me. I need fresh air." We ended up at the waterfront, lights reflecting on Puget Sound. He told me about the partner he'd lost because he refused to come out to his own family. "I thought I was protecting him," Harrison said, voice rough. "Turns out I was just protecting myself." I wanted to tell him I understood more than he knew, but the words stuck. Instead, I asked, "Do you ever regret it?" He looked at me, rain dripping from his hair. "Every day? But regret taught me what I won't do again." We stood there in the downpour until I finally said, "I think I might be different from what everyone expects." Harrison didn't flinch. He just nodded. "I've known since your first class. You carry it in your shoulders." The admission should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like the first full breath I'd taken in years. The next evening, we met at the cafe again. This time, the conversation went deeper. I told him about the girls I'd dated to keep my parents happy, the way I'd forced myself to feel something that never came. Harrison shared stories of late-night training sessions where he'd pushed his own feelings down so hard he almost broke. Somewhere between the second and third cup of coffee, our hands brushed on the table, and neither of us moved away. But the world outside the cafe wasn't waiting. Friday night, Mike showed up at the dojo unannounced. He watched Harrison correct my stance with narrowed eyes. Later, he cornered me in the locker room. "Dude, be careful. People are talking. Alex said some stuff about you too." I laughed it off, but the seed was planted. Saturday morning, I woke to a text from Harrison. "Private lesson at 7? Just us." My heart raced the entire drive. The dojo was dark when I arrived, only the emergency lights on. Harrison was already on the mat stretching. "Thought we could work without the crowd," he said. We trained hard, laughter mixing with grunts of effort. At one point I slipped. He caught me, arms around my waist. Time stopped. Our faces were inches apart. I could feel his breath on my lips. Neither of us moved. Then his phone rang. The dojo alarm company, checking an open door sensor. The moment shattered. We stepped apart, laughing nervously, but the air between us had changed forever. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Harrison's face, felt the ghost of his arms. For the first time, I stopped telling myself it was nothing. It was everything. And it terrified me. Monday, the rumor mill started turning. Alex made a comment loud enough for others to hear. "Sensei sure spends a lot of time with the new guy." A couple of students glanced my way. I ignored it, but the weight pressed heavier. Harrison pulled me aside after class. "Ignore them. They don't know anything." His hand squeezed my shoulder, and for the first time, I let myself lean into the touch just a little. The kiss happened on a Tuesday that felt like any other until it didn't. The dojo had emptied early, a rare quiet night. Harrison and I stayed to review tournament forms. We moved through the routine until we reached the final hold. His hands were on my shoulders, guiding me into position. Then they weren't guiding anymore. They were holding. Our eyes met, and something broke open between us. He whispered my name like a question. I answered by closing the distance. The kiss was soft at first, hesitant, then deeper, years of denial pouring out in one moment. When we pulled apart, both of us were breathing hard. "I've wanted to do that since the first time I corrected your stance," Harrison admitted, forehead resting against mine. I laughed shakily. I thought I was losing my mind. We sat on the mat talking until midnight. He told me about the life he'd built carefully hidden, the fear of losing the dojo if parents pulled their kids. I told him about the future my family had already written for me. Wife, kids, white picket fence. "I don't want that future anymore," I said. Harrison took my hand. "Then we figure out a new one. Together. But we go slow. No one needs to know until you're ready." The next weeks were stolen moments. Late-night training sessions that ended in quiet kisses. Coffee runs where our knees touched under the table. Texts that made me smile at 2 a.m. The dojo stayed packed, business booming. But behind the scenes, everything had changed. I was falling hard and fast. Then the first misunderstanding hit. One evening, Alex stayed late, to ask Harrison about advanced ranking. I walked in on them standing close, Alex's hand on Harrison's arm. Jealousy flared hot and ugly. I left without a word. Harrison texted later, "It's not what you think." He was asking about belt tests. I believed him, but the doubt lingered like a bruise. Mike noticed the change in me. "You're different, man. Happier, but also distracted. What's going on?" I almost told him. Almost. Instead, I said it was just the training paying off. He didn't look convinced. The real storm started when my mother called to say she and Dad were coming to Seattle for a surprise visit. To see this famous dojo you keep talking about. Panic set in. Harrison suggested we keep things professional while they were here. I agreed, but the secrecy already felt like a weight. During their visit, the dojo was on its best behavior. Packed classes, flawless demonstrations. Harrison was the perfect professional. My parents were impressed. "That instructor seems like a good role model," Dad said. I smiled through gritted teeth, knowing the truth would destroy them. The night they left, Harrison and I met at his apartment for the first time. We didn't train. We talked, kissed, held each other like the world might end if we let go. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Me too," he said. "But I'm more scared of never having this." We fell asleep tangled together, the first night I ever spent with someone who saw all of me. But secrets have short lives in crowded places. The next morning, Alex posted a vague story on social media. A photo of two silhouettes in the dojo after hours with the caption, "Some things can't stay hidden forever." The comments started rolling in. The rumor was no longer a whisper. The text from Mike came at 7 a.m. "We need to talk. Now." I met him at the campus coffee shop, stomach in knots. He looked hurt. "Alex showed me the photo. And I've seen the way you look at Harrison. Kevin, are you gay?" The word hung between us. I could have lied. Instead, I nodded. Mike stared at his coffee for a long moment. I thought we told each other everything. Then he stood up. "Your parents called me yesterday. They're worried." I didn't say anything, but I won't lie for you either. He walked out. The betrayal cut deeper than any punch. By afternoon, the dojo was buzzing. Parents were pulling kids from classes. Alex had accidentally let the rumor spread. Harrison called an emergency meeting after closing. The remaining students and I gathered on the mats. He stood tall, voice steady. "I won't deny who I am. If that means some of you leave, I understand. But the dojo is still a place of respect." Half the advanced class walked out. The silence afterward was deafening. I found Harrison in his office later, staring at the wall. "This is my fault," I said. He shook his head. "No. This is the price of living honestly. I've been hiding for years. Maybe it's time to stop." But I saw the fear in his eyes. The dojo was his entire life. That night my parents called. Someone from the dojo had messaged them anonymously. The conversation was brutal. Dad's voice cracked with anger and disappointment. Mom cried. "We raised you better than this," Dad said before hanging up. I sat on the floor of my apartment and broke. Harrison came over without being asked. He held me while I shook. No words needed. The next week was hell. Enrollment dropped. Local news picked up the story. Popular Seattle dojo faces backlash over instructor's personal life. Harrison's phone wouldn't stop ringing. I offered to quit, to disappear, to do anything to save his dream. He refused. "If I lose the dojo for being who I am, at least I kept you. That's worth more than any building." His sacrifice broke something open inside me. For the first time, I understood love wasn't just butterflies. It was choosing someone even when the world demanded you choose yourself. I confronted Alex in the parking lot. He admitted he'd been jealous, that he'd wanted Harrison's attention for himself. "I didn't think it would get this big," he muttered. I walked away without answering. There was nothing left to say. My parents showed up unannounced 2 days later. The confrontation in Harrison's office was raw. Dad demanded I come home. Mom begged me to get help. Harrison stood beside me, calm and respectful. "I love your son," he said simply, "and I will never ask him to be someone he isn't." The room went silent. Dad stared at us for a long minute, then turned and left without another word. Mom lingered, tears in her eyes. "I just want you happy," she whispered before following. That night, Harrison and I sat on the empty mats under the dim lights. "I might lose everything," he said quietly. I took his hand. "You won't lose me." In that moment, I knew I had grown into someone I finally recognized. 3 months later, the dojo was still standing, Smaller, quieter, but alive. Many students had returned once the noise died down. New ones arrived, drawn by the story of a teacher who refused to hide. Harrison rebuilt slowly, honestly. I stood beside him every step, no longer hiding. My parents hadn't called in weeks, but Mom sent a short text last week, thinking of you. Maybe we can talk soon. It wasn't acceptance yet, but it was a door cracking open. Mike reached out too, awkward, apologetic. I was wrong to bail. Still my best friend. I met him for coffee. We're rebuilding, one careful conversation at a time. Alex transferred to another school. The rumor mill moved on to newer drama. Life settled into a new normal, training together every morning, quiet dinners at Harrison's place, weekends exploring the city hand in hand. The fear didn't vanish, but it no longer controlled me. One evening after the last student left, Harrison locked the door and turned to me with that same smile from the very first class. Ready for one more round? We sparred lightly, laughter echoing off the walls. When we finished, he pulled me close. "Thank you for choosing us," he whispered. I kissed him right there in the middle of the mat where everything had started. The journey hadn't been clean or easy. There had been misunderstandings that nearly broke us, a betrayal that cost friendships, sacrifices that tested everything we had. But every scar proved we were stronger together. I had walked into this dojo lost and left it found. Standing there with Harrison's arms around me, the bright lights reflecting off the polished floor, I finally understood the real fight wasn't against opponents on the mat. It was against the voices that told me I had to be someone else. I had won. But the real question remains, can true love between two men survive every storm society throws at it? Or will fear always win in the end? True or false?